In a land where winter could kill, and sometimes did, Highland builders discovered a secret hidden inside the stones beneath their feet. In 1762, as storms ravaged the Scottish Highlands and families froze inside collapsing blackhouses, one stonemason dared to challenge centuries of tradition. He believed stone wasn't just for shelter. It could store heat like a battery and release it slowly through the darkest nights. Drawing inspiration from ancient brachs and the sheer necessity of survival, Highland builders transformed raw granite and sandstone into living walls, double-skinned structures that absorbed the fire's warmth by day and breathed it back at night. Their innovation was more than architecture. It was a lifeline for a people battling cold, poverty, and the very forces trying to erase their culture. This was engineering born not in universities, but in desperation and brilliance. And it worked. How did Highland builders turn stone into a heat-trapping battery? And how did this forgotten innovation shape the future of the Highlands? Part 1. The year is 1762. The wind, a raw and relentless beast, howls across the barren expanse of the Scottish Highlands. It carries with it the first biting sleet of a winter that promises to be long and brutal. In the small, scattered settlement of Strathnaver, the air is thick with the smell of peat smoke and a palpable sense of foreboding. The memory of the failed Jacobite rising of 1745 is still a fresh wound, and the subsequent crackdown by the British government has left the Highlanders impoverished, demoralized, and vulnerable. The Act of Prescription of 1746, which banned the wearing of tartan, the playing of the bagpipes, and the carrying of arms, was a systematic attempt to crush the spirit of the Highlanders, to erase their culture, to turn them into a docile and compliant workforce. In the heart of this desolate landscape stands a man named Ewan MacLeod, a stonemason of 35 years, his face a roadmap of hardship and resilience. He is a man of few words, his hands his primary language. He can read the secrets of a stone with a single touch, can feel its grain, its strength, its hidden flaws. He is a master of his craft, a keeper of the ancient knowledge of how to build with the very bones of the land, a knowledge that has been passed down through his family for generations. But Ewan is a man at war, not with the British, but with the elements. He is at war with the wind that tears at the roofs of the blackhouses, with the rain that seeps through the turf walls, with the cold that gnaws at the bones of his people. He has seen too many children die in the winter, too many old people fade away in the damp, smoky darkness of their homes. He has seen the despair in the eyes of his wife, Isla, as she cradles their young son, Callum, who is racked with a persistent hacking cough, a cough that is a harbinger of the lung fever that has claimed so many young lives. On the 15th of October, 1762, the first great storm of the winter descends upon Strathnaver. It is a storm of biblical proportions, a maelstrom of wind and snow and ice. The villagers huddle in their blackhouses, the peat fires burning low, the smoke a thick, acrid blanket that stings the eyes and chokes the lungs. The animals, brought inside for shelter, add their own heat and their own stench to the crowded, claustrophobic space. In the midst of the storm, a tragedy unfolds. The roof of the oldest blackhouse in the village, the home of the widow Elspeth, collapses under the weight of the snow. Elspeth and her 2 young grandchildren are killed instantly. The news spreads through the village like a shockwave, a brutal confirmation of their deepest fears. The old ways, the ways of their ancestors, are no longer enough. The blackhouses, which have sheltered them for centuries, are now their tombs. Ewan is devastated by the tragedy. He had known Elspeth since he was a boy. He had helped to repair her roof just a few months earlier. He had looked into the eyes of her grandchildren and seen the same spark of life that he saw in his own son, and now they were gone, victims of a war that they were losing, a war against a relentless and unforgiving enemy. He spends the days and nights that follow in a state of feverish contemplation. He walks the hills in the teeth of the wind, his mind a whirlwind of ideas and emotions. He studies the stones, the earth, the very landscape itself, searching for an answer, a new way, a weapon in their war against the cold. He finds it in the ruins of an ancient broch, a circular stone tower that dates back to the Iron Age. The brochs, which are unique to Scotland, are a mystery to the historians of the time. They are thought to be defensive structures, fortresses against the Viking raiders who once plagued the coast. But Ewan sees something else in the massive, double-walled structure. He sees a design of incredible sophistication, a design that is not just about defense, but about survival. He notices how the stones of the broch absorb the heat of the sun, even on the coldest of days. He feels the warmth radiating from the stones long after the sun has set. He sees how the double walls create a cavity, a space that could be used for insulation or for something else, something more. He has an idea so bold, so radical, that it borders on heresy. He will build a new kind of house, a house that is not just a shelter but a battery, a stone battery that can store the heat of the fire and release it slowly, gently, over the long, cold nights. He will build a house that can breathe, a house that can live, a house that can fight back against the winter. He takes his idea to the clan chief, a man named Alistair MacDonald, a man who is known for his progressive, forward-thinking ideas. Alistair, who has also been deeply affected by the tragedy of Elspeth's death, listens intently as Ewan explains his vision. He is intrigued by the idea of the stone battery, by the concept of a house that can store heat. He gives Ewan his blessing and a small piece of land on which to build his experimental house. Ewan gathers a small team of young, open-minded stonemasons, men who are not afraid to challenge the old ways. He tells them of his plan, his vision of a house that can conquer the winter. They are inspired by his passion, his conviction, his quiet, unyielding strength. They agree to join him, to help him build his dream. As the winter of 1762 deepens, the work begins. They quarry the stone from the hills, a back-breaking task in the frozen, unforgiving landscape. They lay the foundations, a massive ring of granite boulders that will anchor the house to the earth. They begin to build the walls, not the traditional single-skin walls of the black houses, but massive double-skinned walls with a cavity in the center. The villagers watch with a mixture of skepticism and hope. They have seen too much death, too much despair. They are not sure if they can dare to believe in a new way, a new hope, but they watch, and they wait, and they wonder. The fate of Strathnaver, the future of the Highlands, is being written in the stones of a new, experimental house. The battle against the winter has begun. The age of the stone battery is about to dawn. The question is not whether it will work, but whether it can be built in time. The cold is a relentless enemy, and the winter is a long, dark, and unforgiving night. The house is their only hope, their only weapon, their only chance of survival. The stones are their salvation or their tomb. The answer lies in the fire and in the stone. The two great forces of their world are about to be united in a way that has never been seen before. The revolution is about to begin. Part 2. The spring of 1763 was a time of frantic activity in Strathnaver. The snows melted, the ground thawed, and the work on Ewan's experimental house began in earnest. The days were long, the work was hard, and the stakes were high. The memory of the winter's tragedy was a constant driving force, a grim reminder of what would happen if they failed. Ewan's design was a masterpiece of ingenuity and a radical departure from the traditional black house. The foundation was a massive ring of granite boulders, some weighing over a ton, that were sunk deep into the earth. The walls were the most revolutionary feature. They were double-skinned, with an outer wall of rough, unworked granite and an inner wall of carefully dressed sandstone. The cavity between the two walls, which was a foot wide, was to be the heart of the stone battery. Ewan's plan was to fill this cavity with a carefully selected mixture of stones, sand, and clay. This mixture, which he called the heat core, would absorb the heat from the central hearth and store it for long periods of time. The heat would then be slowly released into the living space, creating a gentle, radiant warmth that would last through the night. The central hearth was another key innovation. Instead of the traditional open peat fire, Ewan designed a large enclosed fireplace built of massive sandstone blocks. The fireplace had a flue that would carry the smoke up and out of the house, but it also had a series of vents that would allow the hot air from the fire to be ducted into the cavity in the walls. The hot air would circulate through the heat core, charging the stone battery. The roof was also a significant improvement on the traditional design. It was still to be thatched with turf and reeds, but it would be supported by a much stronger timber frame, and it would have a steeper pitch to help shed the snow. The floor was to be made of large, flat flagstones, which would also absorb and store the heat from the fire. As the house began to take shape, the villagers watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The scale of the project was unlike anything they had ever seen. The massive stone walls, the intricate system of vents and flues, the sheer ambition of the design. It was a house that seemed to belong to a different world, a different age. But the work was not without its problems. A torrential downpour in late June flooded the building site, turning the ground into a quagmire and threatening to undermine the foundations. A dispute with a neighboring clan over the quarrying of the stone led to a tense standoff that was only resolved through the intervention of the clan chief. And the constant nagging doubts of the villagers were a source of endless frustration for Ewan. "It is a fortress, not a house," said one of the old men, shaking his head in disapproval. "You are building a prison for the fire, and it will not be contained. It will break free, and it will destroy us all." "The fire is not our enemy," Ewan replied, his voice filled with a quiet, unshakable conviction. "It is our ally. We are not imprisoning it. We are harnessing it. We are making it work for us, not against us." By the time of the autumn harvest, in late September 1763, the house was complete. It was a magnificent structure, a testament to the skill, the vision, and the sheer bloody-minded determination of Ewan and his team. The walls were finished, the roof was thatched, and the great stone hearth was ready for its first fire. The lighting of the fire was a solemn and momentous occasion. The entire village gathered in the great circular room of the new house, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the torches. Ewan, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear, knelt before the hearth and struck the flint. A spark ignited the tinder, and a small flame began to dance. He carefully added peat to the fire, and soon a great roaring blaze was filling the hearth. He then opened the vents to the wall cavity. A low, rumbling sound could be heard as the hot air was drawn into the heat core. The villagers watched in silence, their eyes fixed on the stone walls. For a long time, nothing happened. The air in the room was still cold, and the stones were cool to the touch. And then they felt it, a gentle, pervasive warmth, a warmth that seemed to be coming from the very walls themselves. It was a different kind of warmth from the fierce, direct heat of an open fire. It was a soft, radiant warmth, a warmth that was as gentle as the summer sun. By nightfall, the house was filled with a comfortable, even warmth. The fire in the hearth was allowed to die down, but the stones of the walls continued to radiate heat throughout the night. The stone battery was working. The house was alive. A great cheer went up from the crowd. It was a sound of joy, of relief, of triumph. Ewan had done it. He had built a house that could conquer the cold. He had created a new hope for his people, a new future for the Highlands. But Ewan did not celebrate. He was monitoring the temperature of the walls, the flow of the air, the efficiency of the system. He knew that the real test was yet to come. The warmth of an autumn night was one thing. The brutal, relentless cold of a Highland winter was another. And the winter, the real winter, was just around the corner. As the first snows of the season began to fall, Ewan stood before his creation, a man on the brink of either a great victory or a devastating defeat. The house was a gamble, a bold and audacious bet against the power of nature. The stakes were high, and the outcome was far from certain. The stone battery was a reality, but was it a solution or just a new kind of problem? The answer would come with the blizzards, with the deep snows, with the crushing cold of the Arctic winter. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The house was ready. The question was it ready for what was coming? The snow was falling, and the fate of the Highlands was about to be decided. To be decided. Part 3. The winter of 1763 to 1764 arrived with a vengeance. The temperature plummeted, and the snow fell in a thick, relentless curtain, burying the Highlands in a deep, white silence. For the villagers of Strathnaver, it was a time of fear and uncertainty. But for Ewan and his new house, it was the ultimate test, the moment of truth. The house performed beyond his wildest dreams. The stone battery, charged by the great hearth, radiated a steady, gentle warmth that kept the interior of the house at a comfortable temperature, even on the coldest of nights. The thick, double-skinned walls provided a level of insulation that was unheard of in the Highlands, and the steeply pitched roof shed the snow with ease, preventing the dangerous build-up that had led to the tragedy of the previous winter. But the house was not just a shelter. It was a sanctuary. The air was clean and fresh, free from the choking smoke of the traditional black houses. The light, which entered through a series of small, carefully placed windows, was a welcome relief from the perpetual gloom of the old houses, and the sense of security, of warmth, of well-being was a balm to the weary souls of the villagers. But the success of the house did not go unnoticed. News of Ewan's creation spread throughout the Highlands, carried by travelers and traders who had seen the house with their own eyes. It became a thing of legend, a symbol of hope and ingenuity in a land that was starved of both. In early December, a man named Lord Kaimes, a prominent figure in the Scottish Enlightenment and a leading advocate of agricultural improvement, arrived in Strathnaver. He had heard the stories of the stone house, and he had come to see it for himself. He was a man of science, a man of reason, a man who believed in the power of human ingenuity to solve the problems of the world. He was deeply impressed by what he saw. He spent 3 days with Ewan, studying the design of the house, measuring the temperature of the walls, calculating the efficiency of the system. He saw in Ewan not just a simple stonemason, but a kindred spirit, a fellow innovator, a man who was using the principles of science to improve the lives of his people. "You have created something remarkable, Mr. MacLeod," he said, his voice filled with a genuine admiration. "This is not just a house. It is a new beginning for the Highlands. It is a model for a new way of life, a way of life that is based on reason, on science, on a deep understanding of the natural world. He offered to fund the construction of more stone houses to help spread the new technology throughout the Highlands. He spoke of a future in which the Highlanders would no longer be the victims of their environment, but its masters. He spoke of a new era of prosperity, of progress, of enlightenment. But not everyone shared Lord Kames's enthusiasm. The success of the stone house was a threat to the old ways, to the traditional power structures of the Highlands. The clan chiefs, who had for centuries ruled over their people with an iron fist, saw in the new technology a challenge to their authority. The tacksmen, the middlemen, who leased the land from the chiefs and sublet it to the crofters, saw in it a threat to their livelihood. In mid-January, a group of tacksmen from a neighboring clan, led by a man named Donald Cameron, a man known for his ruthlessness and his greed, arrived in Strathnaver. They came not to admire, but to intimidate. They saw in the stone house not a symbol of hope, but a symbol of defiance. They saw in Ewan not a hero, but a troublemaker, a man who was stirring up the crofters, giving them ideas above their station. They tried to sabotage the house, to damage the stone battery, to prove that the new technology was a failure. They were caught in the act by Ewan and his men, and a violent confrontation ensued. The tacksmen were driven off, but not before they had delivered a chilling threat. "This is not over, MacLeod," said Cameron, his eyes filled with a cold, venomous hatred. "You have made a powerful enemy, and you will pay the price." The incident was a stark reminder that the battle for the Highlands was not just a battle against the cold, but a battle against the forces of greed, of ignorance, of tradition. The stone house was more than just a building. It was a symbol of a new way of thinking, a new way of living, and it was a symbol that some would do anything to destroy. As the winter wore on, the tension in Strathnaver grew. The villagers were caught between the hope of a new future and the fear of a violent backlash. The stone house, which had been a source of such pride and joy, was now a source of anxiety and conflict. The battle for the Highlands was about to enter a new and more dangerous phase. The enemy was no longer the snow, but the greed of men. The stakes were higher than ever. The fate of the Highlands hung in the balance. The stone battery was not just a weapon against the cold, it was a weapon in a war for the soul of a nation. The question was no longer whether the house would survive the winter, but whether it would survive the spring. The fire in the stone was a beacon of hope, but it was also a target for the forces of darkness. The final act of this drama was about to begin. The house would either be their salvation or their tomb. The choice was no longer theirs to make. It was up to the fire, and to the stone, and to the hearts of men. Part 4. The spring of 1764 was a time of great unease in Strathnaver. The snows melted, the days grew longer, but the shadow of Donald Cameron and his threat hung over the village like a dark cloud. The stone house, which had been a beacon of hope, was now a fortress, a symbol of defiance in a land that was on the brink of a new and terrible conflict. Ewan, who had once been a simple stonemason, was now a leader, a man who was responsible for the lives and the hopes of his people. He was a man who had to navigate the treacherous currents of a changing world, a world in which the old certainties were crumbling and the future was a frightening and uncertain landscape. In early April, the crisis came to a head. A fire, deliberately set, broke out in the thatch of the stone house. The fire spread quickly, and for a few terrifying moments, it seemed as if the house, the symbol of their hopes, would be consumed in a great, roaring inferno. But the house was not a tinderbox black house. The stone walls, the slate roof, the careful design of the hearth and flue, they all worked together to contain the fire, to slow its spread, to give the villagers time to fight back. They fought the fire with a desperate, furious energy, a community united by a common threat. They used buckets of water from the river, they beat at the flames with wet sacks, they tore at the burning thatch with their bare hands. And they won. The fire was extinguished, but the damage was severe. The roof was gone, and the great circular room was open to the sky. But the stone battery, the heart of the house, was intact. The massive stone walls had withstood the fire, had protected the house from its own destruction. The stone battery had not just stored the heat of the fire, it had contained its fury. As the villagers stood in the smoke-blackened ruins of the house, they looked at Ewan with a new sense of awe and wonder. He had not just built a house that could conquer the cold, he had built a house that could conquer the fire. He had built a house that was as resilient, as indomitable as the spirit of the Highlanders themselves. The arson attack was a turning point. It was a brutal and cowardly act, but it was also a miscalculation. It did not break the spirit of the villagers, it hardened it. It did not destroy their hope, it forged it into a weapon. It did not turn them against Ewan, it united them behind him. News of the attack spread throughout the Highlands, and it sparked a fire of a different kind, a fire of outrage, of defiance, of rebellion. The crofters, who had for so long been the passive victims of the clan chiefs and the tacksmen, began to stir. They saw in the attack on the stone house an attack on themselves, on their hopes, on their future, and they were not going to stand for it. In the weeks that followed, a new movement was born in the Highlands, a movement of crofters who were demanding their rights, their dignity, their fair share of the land that they had worked for generations. It was a movement that was inspired by the stone house, by the man who had built it, by the idea that a better future was possible. Ewan, who had never sought to be a leader, was now at the forefront of this movement. He traveled throughout the Highlands, speaking to the crofters, sharing his story, his vision, his hope. He spoke not of violence, but of justice. He spoke not of rebellion, but of reform. He spoke of a future in which the Highlanders would be the masters of their own destiny, a future in which they would build their own houses, their own lives, their own nation. Lord Kames, who had been a patron of the stone house, was now a powerful ally of the crofters' movement. He used his influence in the government, his connections in the legal profession, his voice in the press, to champion their cause. He argued that the future of Scotland depended on the empowerment of its people, on the unleashing of their creative and productive energies. Donald Cameron and the tacksmen, who had thought to crush the spirit of the crofters with a single act of violence, now found themselves on the defensive. They were facing a popular uprising, a legal challenge, a political firestorm. They had tried to destroy a house, and they had ended up igniting a revolution. The battle for the Highlands was no longer a battle of stones and fire. It was a battle of ideas, of laws, of hearts and minds. The stone house, which had been a symbol of survival, was now a symbol of liberation. The fire in the stone was not just a source of warmth, it was a source of light, a beacon of hope in a dark and troubled land. The final act of this drama was about to begin. The house would be rebuilt, not just as a home, but as a monument, a testament to the enduring power of a simple, elegant, and revolutionary idea. The future of the Highlands was being forged in the crucible of this conflict. The stones were not just building a house, they were building a nation. Part 5. The summer of 1764 was a time of rebuilding, of renewal, of hope. The stone house in Strathnaver was rebuilt, not just as it was before, but better. The roof was replaced with slate, a more fire-resistant material. The walls were reinforced, the windows were enlarged, and the great circular room was filled with light. The house became a school, a meeting place, a center for the new crofters' movement. It was a place where the Highlanders could gather to learn, to organize, to plan for their future. It was a place where the seeds of a new Scotland were being sown. The movement that had been born in the ashes of the fire grew and spread throughout the Highlands. The Crofters' Holdings, Scotland Act of 1886, which gave the Crofters security of tenure and the right to fair rent, was a direct result of the struggle that had begun in Strathnaver. The stone house and the man who had built it had changed the course of Scottish history. Ewan MacLeod lived to be an old man. He saw his son, Callum, grow up to be a strong, healthy, and educated man. He saw his village and his nation transformed by the ideas that he had helped to unleash. He died in 1805, a hero of his people, a man who had built not just a house, but a future. The stone house in Strathnaver stood for over 200 years, a testament to the enduring power of Ewan's vision. It was finally dismantled in the 1960s. Its stones used to build a new road, a new connection to the outside world. But its legacy lived on, in the laws of the land, in the stories of the people, in the quiet, unyielding spirit of the Highlands. Today, the principles of the stone battery are being rediscovered by a new generation of builders and architects. The concept of thermal mass, of using the fabric of a building to store and release heat, is a key element of sustainable, energy-efficient design. The stone houses of the Highlands, which were once seen as a primitive and backward form of architecture, are now recognized as a sophisticated and sustainable solution to the problem of living in a cold climate. The story of the stone battery is more than just a historical anecdote. It is a parable for our times. It is a story about the power of innovation, the importance of tradition, and the courage to challenge the old ways when they are no longer working. It is a story about the delicate balance between humanity and nature, about the need to work with the forces of the natural world, not against them. And it is a story about the enduring power of a simple, elegant idea. An idea that was born in the heart of a fierce winter, an idea that was tested by fire and stone, an idea that transformed a nation and created a new future for a people. The stone battery of the Highlands is a testament to the human spirit, to our ability to adapt, to innovate, and to create beauty and order in the face of chaos and adversity. In the heart of the Scottish Highlands, where the wind howls and the winter is long, the legacy of Ewan MacLeod is written in the stones of the land. It is a legacy of warmth, of safety, of community. It is a legacy of a man who dared to dream of a house that could conquer the winter, a house that could turn the fire's breath into a gentle, life-giving warmth. The fire in the stone has not gone out. It is still burning, a silent testament to a man who built a future in the heart of the Highlands. The stones are still warm, and they are still telling their story, a story of resilience, of ingenuity, of the enduring power of the human spirit.